Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Carissa Smith, and I'm a senior advisor for the Office of Public Engagement here at the White House. I am so excited to welcome you all to our virtual White House celebration of Afro-Latino heritage. As a proud Boricua myself and Afro-Latina, I'm especially proud to be here this afternoon with you all, especially coming off of a very exciting announcement and just an overall very excited month celebrating Black history. I'll be remiss, of course, if I just didn't mention what we are all experiencing here throughout the building, which is joy to see the president's nominee to the Supreme Court, which is Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson. We have a tight schedule of speakers and programs. So without further ado, I want to actually introduce the first speaker who will be delivering opening remarks. I can say that I've had the honor and pleasure of working alongside her these past few months before she transitioned on to bigger things. She herself is a trusted longtime advisor to President Biden and recently served as the chief of staff to First Lady Jill Biden. It is my privilege to introduce the Honorable Ambassador to Spain, Julissa Reynoso. So without further ado, over to you, Ambassador.
Thank you so much, Carissa, and thank you to the Office of Public Engagement and Ernesto Presa as well for organizing this event. I'm really honored to be part of this discussion and to briefly say hello and greet all the attendees as we convene in this special month for celebrating Black History Month, but in particular in this discussion, ensuring that the voices of Afro-Latinos and Afro-Latinas are also part of the discussion, highlighting the contributions and obviously our voices and our presence in all that is the greatness of the United States. I currently serve as U.S. Ambassador to Spain, and I have to say that in light of one of the greatest and most important values and our probably one of our most significant strengths is really our history and our diversity and what we contribute as a very distinct collective that is very, very special and different from many societies and makes us a great democracy, even with our the issues that we've had to grapple and the things we still need to work with and improve. We as a country have really come a long way, and our diversity and the contributions of all our communities make us one of the greatest powers in the world today and in world history. President Biden in particular has made a commitment and has significantly contributed to the discussion and ensuring that people of color are really at the table, both in terms of participation and diversity, in terms of everything from the cabinet to the entire administration, but also his commitment to ensuring that there is a real path forward from part of the federal government in promoting equity and promoting equality and opportunity for all people. And one of the first things he did as president was to sign the executive order to promote racial equity and equality in all its forms with respect to the work of the federal government. I now work for the State Department after being at the White House for over a year, and I see it in our foreign policy and the work we're doing here in Europe. So I'm very proud to represent the country and the Biden administration and all its efforts to ensure that all our greatness is promoted and our diversity is part of our daily foreign policy practices. So thank you very much, Carissa, and I'm really proud to be part of this conversation. And again, I think this is the beginning of a tremendous dialogue, and I'm excited to hear from the rest of the speakers. But as someone who represents the United States overseas, I'm really proud of what this administration has done. There's a lot more to do, but I think, as Carissa said, a day like today, where we have a historic moment, just demonstrates our path forward and how special we are as a nation and as a country. So thank you very much for allowing me to be part of this table, this round table, and this discussion. And I look forward to continuing to hear from the rest of the speakers. So thank you, Carissa.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. We definitely miss you here, but we know you're doing amazing work across the globe. So just thank you always for your continued leadership and your words today. Next, I want to turn it over to another groundbreaking, history making Dr. Noguera, who's the current dean of the University of Southern California's Rossier School of Education. Dr. Noguera is a sociologist by training and has an extensive career in academia. Thank you so much for joining us here today, Dean, and I will actually turn it over to you.
Thank you, Carissa, and thank you for the honor of joining this program and this distinguished group of speakers you've assembled. I want to applaud the White House, first of all, for recognizing Afro-Latinos, because we are a segment of the population that is often rendered invisible. And I want to talk about that, why that's the case, to set a context for this discussion, because, and I'll use an anecdote to make the point. About a week ago, I was headed to the airport and going through security, and a TSA officer, who happened to be a Black woman, asked me, she said, "What is your race?" So I looked at her, I said, "Clearly I'm a Black man, right?" She says, "Well, your name threw me off." I said, "Well, we come in all flavors." And she laughed. And then I went through security, and then I headed to get some food. And the people serving the food spoke Spanish. So I ordered my food in Spanish, and the person serving me said, "Oh, you can speak Spanish." I said, "Yeah, y tú, and you can speak it too." And he laughed, and I said, "Black people can speak all kinds of languages." And he laughed again. And so what the point I'm trying to make here is we tend to think of race in dichotomous terms, as if there are these discrete categories, not recognizing that, first of all, race is always a social and political category, much more so than a biological one. Those of you who know the history of race in America know that Black people were, there was the one drop rule that determined who was Black, who was not. And even that rule did not work the same way in every state. In states like Virginia, 1/8 Black made you Black. In states like Louisiana, 1/32 Black made you Black. And so there's an arbitrariness to these categories. And furthermore, they're not universal. So what it means to be Black in the United States is not the same as what it means in Latin America. Now, Latin America, many people don't realize, millions of enslaved Africans were brought to Latin America and the Caribbean, particularly Brazil, but all over. My family heritage is from Venezuela. And we have many Black people in Venezuela, Peru, we can go on down the list, Colombia, all over Central America. But again, we tend to think of Latino as though it were a racial group, instead of recognizing it's actually multiracial. There are Germans, there are Asians, there are indigenous people, all part of Latin America, and lots of people who are of mixed heritage. And so part of the confusion about this comes from the fact that we think of race very differently in the United States and don't quite know what to do with Afro-Latinos. On top of that, I think all of us also know there's a history of anti-Blackness, not just in the United States, but in Latin America as well. And with that history and the racism directed at Black people comes a denial of Blackness that you see in many Latin American countries, where even people who phenotypically look Black will sometimes say they're not Black because of the stigma associated with being Black. And we see that in many parts of Latin America. And it's a legacy of the racism that Black people have experienced. So sometimes people we think look Black in this country will say, "I'm not Black, I'm Dominican, I'm Cuban, I'm Puerto Rican," because again, we're confusing race with nationality or race with heritage. And so all of this makes for, I think, difficulty in understanding who Afro-Latinos are as a people, despite the fact that in sports, you think about baseball, without Afro-Latinos, there are a lot of teams that would not be able to field a team because we're everywhere. And you see us. You see us in boxing. You see us in entertainment. Think of Celia Cruz. So although we are present, we are not always understood and therefore not easily placed within the kind of social landscape and fabric of this country. Nonetheless, our contributions have always been important. even much more so now. Think of someone like Pedro Albizu Campos, many people think of the father of Puerto Rico and Puerto Rican independence, who was a graduate of Harvard University, and again, a person not easily placed within the way we categorize people in this country. So having the opportunity to now check off more than one box on the census is important. I want to acknowledge that, because one of the things we know is that when you are not counted, you do not get the same rights and recognition as those who are. And so I think we've made steps forward in acknowledging the complexity of race, the existence of Afro-Latinos, but we have a long way to go, as the ambassador just said, because aside from being identified, there are the obstacles that Afro-Latinos continue to encounter because of this tendency to dichotomize and because of the legacy of racism in this country and others. So I think that I was laughing because we could easily have held this event in September during Latino Heritage Month, as we could during Black History Month, because, you know, again, we represent both, and that's a good thing and something to be celebrated. So thank you, Carissa, for this opportunity. Thank you all for allowing me to be part of this panel and this discussion.
Thank you, thank you, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much, Dean, and just dropping amazing wisdom. I think that's a really good, you know, pretty much really good starter to how we're going to introduce this next panel and how we're going to continue this conversation and amazing recognition of our rich and deep culture and history. So next up, we are going to actually transition to the cross-sector Afro-Latino representation panel. I want to just say, you know, thank you so far. Thank you so far to Ambassador. Thank you so far to Dean for sharing your wisdom and insight. As you may know, on day one of his administration, the president signed an executive order which made clear that racial equity will be at the core of all of its policy making. So next, to moderate us through a conversation about Afro-Latino representation, I want to actually turn it over to a good friend, partner, ally, and advocate of this administration from day one, and that is the president and CEO of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute, Marco Davis. So without further ado, over to you, Marco.
Thank you so much, Carissa. It's such a pleasure to be here and to be celebrating like this. I want to thank Ambassador Reynosa. I want to thank Dr. Pedro Noguera and all the folks on this panel and the one to come, the conversations to come. This is an incredible event. I think it may be historic. So I couldn't be more proud. I couldn't be more honored to be a part of this conversation and to help contribute my granito de arena, my little grain of sand here to advance this effort, this conversation, this awareness around this really important issue that's integral to the fabric of the United States, to our society, to our culture, right? To all the different communities that this is a part of. So couldn't be more excited to be here and a part of this conversation. And I'm joined, as you all can see, by some great friends, by some extraordinary leaders who also just happen to be Afro-Latinos. They are distinguished, accomplished, extremely effective leaders in their fields, in their spaces. And we wanted to bring them together to hear from them firsthand, their perspectives as Afro-Latinos and Latinas themselves, and talking about this topic at this timely moment in history. So I'm going to give them a minute, or just a minute to introduce themselves briefly so that you can hear directly from them about where they're coming from, what they're representing, and then we'll jump into a conversation. And why don't we start with you, Dr. Jackson?
So good afternoon, everyone. It is a privilege to be with you, and I'm so thankful to the program organizers for having included me in this today. I'm Maria Rosario Jackson. I'm chair of the National Endowment for the Arts, very recently appointed. And one of the questions that I think you posed, Marco, had to do with how the identity informs work. In my case, there are several paths to Afro-Latinidad. And in my case, I'm the daughter of an African-American man who lived through Jim Crow segregation with family roots in the South. My mother is a Mexican immigrant. That duality is something that I've grown up with. The ability to see meaningful difference and also see opportunities for bridging was part of my upbringing. The reliance on the arts as a resource to help us understand, I say us, my brother and me, understand as Black, brown kids where we came from and what we were connected to recognize that, yes, there are narratives of oppression, and certainly it's important to understand that and the long-lasting consequences of that. But to also understand that there are narratives of triumph and joy and excellence, and that we're connected to that too. That's what my parents relied on the arts for. And it's certainly a sensibility that I bring to my role in this particular moment as chair of the NEA. And in my past, as someone with an urban planning background, the firm belief that arts and culture and representation are so important to building healthy communities where all people can thrive is something that I also bring to it. Thank you, and so happy to be with you today.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And we can never say it enough. Thank you for answering the call to serve, in addition to all the great work that you've done and being a part of this administration and serving the American people in the role that you are. Let's turn to you, my good friend, Sid Wilson.
Thank you, Marcos. Saludo, mi gente. It's so great to be here with all of my fellow Afro-Latino colegas. My name is Sid Wilson. I'm the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Hispanic Association of Corporate Responsibility. I'm the proud son of two Dominican American Barraoneros from Barahona, Dominican Republic. My father, the late Dr. James Wilson, my mother, Nilda Wilson. We are from the Wilsons from Barahona, and I'll just say real quickly. One is that I'm so thankful for the White House. I'm thankful to the Biden administration for what I understand is the first ever recognition of Afro-Latinos in corporate America, in all of America. When we look at the statistics, 1 in 9 Black people in America are Latino. 1 in 12 Latinos are Black. And when we take a broader perspective, that's 24% of Latinos have some African ancestry. And so certainly, while I'm proud of my Dominican culture, I certainly want to give a shout out to all of my Afro-Latinos who come from places like Luisa, Puerto Rico, Havana, Cuba, Veracruz, Mexico, Panama City, Panama, Limon, Costa Rica, Esmeralda, Ecuador, Yapatera, Peru, Barlovento, Venezuela, Bahia, Brazil, our brothers, the Garifuna community in Honduras, Nicaragua, and Guatemala, and of course our Colombianos in Choco or in Cartagena. But it just goes to show that we are a significantly large community. We have not had the recognition that we should have in the United States. We have the same challenges that African Americans have, and also the same challenges the Latinos have. But it's also important that we have unique challenges as Afro-Latinos that the country and our own community needs to know us, recognize us, and include us. Looking forward to this conversation. Thank you, Marco. And I'll just add that I'm proud that Marco Davis and I are the only two Afro-Latinos to be CEOs of any national Hispanic organization. I've been the CEO for HACER since 2014, and really proud that the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute Board of Directors selected my hermano, Marco Davis, to lead CHCI, where he's been doing that since 2019. So looking forward to this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Sid. Thank you for the kind words as well. And third, and certainly not least, my good friend, my brother, Marvin Figueroa. Say hello.
Thank you, Marco, and thank you all for allowing me to participate today. So good seeing Sid and Marco and Maria. We're new friends now, so looking forward to that friendship. My name is Marvin Figueroa. I'm the Director of Intergovernmental and External Affairs here at the Department of Health and Human Services. But before we talk about the titles, I'm a proud Garifuna. I was born in La Ceiba, Honduras, raised in a small village by the Rio Colón, and I immigrated to the Bronx when I was 5 years old. And I've told Marco this story before, but in Honduras, I'm Garifuna. When I moved to New York City, I'm Honduran. When I went to college, I was Black. And then when I graduated, I turn into an Afro-Latino, right? And why do I say that? Is because a lot of who we are is how people view us is it depends on the context in which they met us. But I've always been the same person, right? The individual who's navigating these two worlds that are very much overlap, but at the same time, very much distinct. So when I think about what Sid mentioned, we do have unique challenges, but we also carry some of the challenges of both communities individually. And what does that look like? How do we show up for both communities who are challenged with our identities as well? It's something that we've been navigating, I know, and I'm looking forward to that conversation about what that means for us in the 21st century.
Thank you, Marvin, and thank you all. And if I may, I'm going to take a moment of editorial privilege as the moderator here and introduce myself, given that, again, we're telling our full story here and we're making sure to be seen as a community, as a population. I am originally a native New Yorker, born and raised just outside of New York City, and I'm the son, in a similar way to Dr. Jackson, I'm the son of a father who was raised in the island of Jamaica, West Indies, and a mother who was born and raised in Guadalajara, Mexico. And so it's part of that expansive definition of Afro-Latino. And just as Marvin was alluding to, I, depending on the situation, depending on the context, will claim and represent being an African-American man, being a Latino, being Jamaican, being Chicano, and being, of course, Afro-Latino, and a New Yorker. And as Marvin mentioned, I'm still the same person, right? I'm still me. We may code switch, but we're still the same individuals, and we still have that same identity at our core, who we are. And it's often the rest of society that's catching up. And speaking of identity, and speaking of catching up in society, I wonder if you all could share just a minute or two, as Dr. Noguera was alluding to. Sometimes we show up differently to different people. People interpret who we are differently, and it often provides an opportunity for some education, for some enlightenment, and for some learning. So I wonder if I could ask you all, how do you show up in your work, in your life? How does your identity play out, whether it be in your professional spaces or in your personal lives? How do you connect to and represent within the Latino community, within the African-American community? Is there a story or an example you might give to help illustrate for our audience the ways in which we move through the world? And once again, let's start with you, Dr. Jackson.
Sure. I think there's something about having been brought up in an African American and Mexican environment, as I said in the earlier comments, that creates this invitation or necessity to look at things from different perspectives and realize that different worldviews are valid, and that there are some differences that are meaningful, and there are other differences that are less meaningful, and there are actual places of that require bridging. So that ability and sensibility around noticing those kinds of differences and ability to bridge, I think, is a way of showing up. When I was a kid, because my father was curious about my mother's culture, he also was seeking that connection and lifting up the African presence in Mexico was something that he was very keen on. And sometimes, to your point earlier, that history in Mexico itself wasn't that celebrated or known. So being able to draw those connections and understand the power of the African diaspora and its beautiful power to unite at times, I think is what comes to mind when you ask that question, Marco.
That's great. And I think I might add, the arts is a really great place where I think we see that expressed, right? Where we see that really presented and enlightened, and sometimes in some controversy, as we've seen recently, but always with an eye towards helping expand people's consciousness, people's understanding of who we are as people, as who we are as communities, as who we are as cultures, right? And so I want to thank you for that work. And I think there's a similar challenge and need in the corporate sector, I think you might agree, Sid. So tell us a little bit about you. How do you move in the world, and how does your identity help play out in the work that you do with corporate America?
Well, thank you, Marco. One of the challenges that we find is that corporate America is still very behind, and only in the last 2 years are they beginning to recognize the intersectionality of our Afro-Latinos who work in corporate America. One of the most basic challenge is how do you allow your Afro-Latinos to identify themselves, and how do you avoid making sure that you don't put them in one bucket and not allow them to be in the other. And what I mean by that is that corporate America for too long used to say, either you are Latino or you are Black. And if you're participating in an event that might be your employee resource group, either you're with the Black employee resource group or you are with the Latino employee resource group. And so when you're
with the added complication of scheduling the meetings at the same time, right? So that you can't even go.
Oh, absolutely. And I've lost count how many times I've been in those situations where they were scheduled at the same time, because this is like the diversity hour. And then you have to figure out, and of course I make sure that if they're happening at the same time, I'm going to make sure I hop from one or the other. But look at the stress that creates on us, where we're not being told how to be authentically Afro-Latino, and recognizing that we do not distinguish between our pride as Black people and our pride as Latinos. And so at the Hispanic Association on Corporate Responsibility at HACER, 3 years ago, we actually were the first to really highlight and illuminate the challenges facing Afro-Latinos in corporate America. And I'm proud that now 3 years later, more companies have started to do Afro-Latino agendas as part of Hispanic Heritage Month and as part of Black History Month than they have ever done before. So there's more work that needs to be done, but it's good that we're seeing that progress. But it's all about allowing us to truly be authentically Afro-Latino, and don't tell us to pick one or the other, because that's who we are as proud Afro-Latinos.
That's great. Thank you, Sid. Well, at the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute at CHCI, our tagline, as it says above my head, is developing the next generation of Latino leaders. Shameless plug. But the reality is that when Marvin Figueroa, I'm going to claim you, brother, when Marvin participated in the CHCI program, he was already a leader. In fact, most, if not all, of the young people and the emerging professionals who participate in CHCI programs are already leaders. But part of the reason we do that, part of the reason we do what we do, is to identify folks who have that leadership, who have that passion, that commitment to go into public service. Marvin, you've had a career, I think most, if not all of your career in public service, working in government at the state level, at the federal level, legislative, now at HHS, serving in the Biden administration. Tell us about your experience walking through government, and what are the needs that we still need to do to help make sure that Afro-Latinos are well represented?
Well, thank you for that, including that lead up, Marco. I would say a couple of things. I think my experience in government, but also life, is just being an educator. That you are, by the very presence of your identity, are constantly teaching people how to treat you, right? And that's whether I'm in the Black community, right, where I'm representing immigration, right? What does it mean to immigrate, to learn English, to kind of navigate the world as a immigrant? And then when I'm in Latino communities, is talking about Blackness, right? And the fact that most often it is marginalized in Latin America, despite the fact that our influence in everything from the music to the food to the dance to how we organize ourselves have been influenced by Black people, right? And so that's kind of I'll start there, right? It's kind of that education process that you do, just being who you are. What does that look like in government? I mean, I think you're always advocating for more people that look like us to be in the room. Most often, again, I'm not saying anything new. You're the first, but you're making sure throughout that you're not the last. In state government, when I was deputy secretary, it was that, but it's also knowing when to take a step back, right? We had a big debate in Richmond when I was there on race. We had a big conversation about the monuments, the Monument Avenue in Richmond, right? Robert E. Lee. And I was not equipped to have that discussion because I'm Honduran, and the racism that manifests itself in Honduras is very different than the one in America. So it's knowing when you can lead, right? Because we have similarities, and when you have to allow space for others to lead because you may not have the necessary background. And so that's been a story of kind of navigating these two worlds, being part of both, but also not being squarely in one. And so that's kind of how I've thought about it and what that looks like in government.
That's great. Thank you so much. Now, you know, the theme this year that's been celebrated at the White House throughout the country for Black History Month is Black wellness. And it's wellness in every sense of the word, financial, spiritual, physical, mental, right? It's about a holistic and a comprehensive sense about wellness. In fact, I know of an organization that has what they call an agenda for Black love. It's having the opportunity and the right and the freedom for Black folks in America to live, to own, to vote, and excel. LOVE, to love, right? That's an example and an iteration of the type of Black wellness we're talking about. Now, we're here convened by the White House. We're all brought together by the Biden administration, not just to reflect the reality and the diversity of the population of the United States, but to help shed light on ways in which we can advance Black wellness in America. And so I'm wondering if you all have any reactions, any thoughts on things that the administration has done to help advance Black wellness. What are the things we should build on? What are the things we should be looking to? What are the things that the administration might continue to do to help advance that goal, which we should note is the theme this month, but will not stop on Monday at the end of Black History Month, but is something we should carry forward. So maybe let's start with you, Marvin, being in government, some of the work you're doing at HHS. We'll switch up the order a little bit and see what your thoughts are.
Well, you shouldn't ask a healthcare person what we're doing for wellness. I mean, there's a couple of things, right? It's rooted in our policies, right? So it's the 14.5 million folks who signed up for health insurance. That's historic, and we pushed out there the idea that we have to go to communities that historically have not been visited to be able to enroll individuals that are not used to having healthcare coverage. It's in the work that we're doing around overdose prevention, right? That is based on treatment prevention, but also harm reduction and other ways, other methods. Because you remember that when the face of those who were addicted was Black and brown, we had a very different strategy. And so we're embracing the fact that we have to be much more compassionate in how we approach this. That's wellness. I mean, I think also it's the fact that we are talking more about behavioral health and not talking about behavioral health to one community, but also going into Black and brown communities and destigmatizing it and saying that this is not only for these groups, it's for you as well, and then making it affordable and accessible. And just so proud that I work for Secretary Becerra, who values those things and has been pushing for more diversity and for more inclusion and for more access for our communities.
That's great. Dr. Jackson, what do you see as things that maybe you've been able to do at the National Endowment or throughout the government that are things that we should know more about and should lean into?
So I think definitely the focus on racial equity is key. And the fact that that is universal throughout government is really important. And I think as we think about wellness in a comprehensive way, in a more holistic way, as you were describing it, Marco, tending to our full selves as humans and reclaiming that humanity that sometimes historically has been stripped. The ability to do that, I think, is really core to wellness. From my perch at the NEA, I think that there are contributions during this administration that have and will continue to be made that have to do with that kind of wellness, right? The arts and what it makes possible, you know, the curiosity, the understanding, compassion, imagination, and agency that is possible because of engagement in the arts. It's important, period. And these are preconditions for the things that we say we aspire our country to be. So I think that having artful lives, expressive lives that allow us to reclaim, repair, dream, imagine, that is all part of wellness. I'm encouraged by what I see as a stronger connection between the arts, health, and community development. I think in the public health field as the concept of determinants of health outcomes become more elastic, and we begin to care more about the quality of places where people grow up and what is available to them. This convergence of community development, health, and the arts I see as really generative space. And I think that's very connected to the concept of wellness.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. And Sid, tell us your perspective on this in the comprehensive sense again of Black wellness and what we can look to the administration to keep doing, to build on, and how can maybe the private sector partner, right, and support those efforts.
Absolutely, Marco. I associate wellness with inclusion and allyship. And here's what I mean is that as Afro-Latinos, we run into the exact challenges that Black people have in America. Driving while Black, shopping while Black, going to a restaurant while Black, going to a sporting event while Black. All these things that tend to impact the Black community. And so that's why, we commend what President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris are doing to address these issues of race, because these things do impact us as Afro-Latinos. But secondly is that we know that corporate America needs to do more to embrace intersectionality and to recognize that it does have an impact on mental health when we're not allowed to be our authentic selves, and recognizing that what happens inside corporate America can't be separated from what happens when we leave our workplaces and get into our cars and drive home, only to find out that we run into the very exact challenges. And so those are, I think, some of the key things. And I will say that I do thank the administration. I will say I was proud that former President Barack Obama had appointed me to the National Museum of the American Latino Study Commission. I was the only Afro-Latino on that commission. There is now a Smithsonian Board of Advisors as we think about the creation of a future Smithsonian National Museum of National Museum of American Latino after the successful completion of the National Museum of African American History and Culture. I'm also proud that Soledad O'Brien is there as our Afro-Latina sister that is making those representations. But we have to think about this from the partnership between the administration as well as corporate and the community in terms of how to make sure that we're doing this. And then I'll say lastly is that for Latinos, you cannot have a Latino gathering if there are no Afro-Latinos. If there's Latinos in the room and there are no Afro-Latinos in there, we have been left out. We must be included. We must be able to say presente. And when we do that, we will be able to do that. We'll be able to say, as Dolores Huerta, si se puede, and as our civil rights brothers and sisters will say, we shall overcome.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sid. Now, shifting gears for a moment, we witnessed history a little earlier today. President Biden nominated the first Black woman for the United States Supreme Court. That's a historic action, historic decision, and it's significant. She's an incredible jurist, personal opinion I want to share. Incredible jurist. I think she's a fabulous, incredible, tremendous choice. But sometimes people use situations like this to divide communities, right? To drive a wedge. People, I think, are wondering how is the Latino community going to react to this naming, right? And I think, as Dr. Jackson mentioned earlier, we sit in a very unique nexus, right? Because as we've all just shared, we view ourselves fully. We claim our rightful place in the Black community and we claim our rightful place in the Latino community. We have perspectives into both communities. And so I'm wondering if you all have any insights to share, both from your personal perspective, but also any conversations you've had with colleagues, with peers, with folks in the Latino community about the naming of this justice and what it means for the nation and for the Latino community. Dr. Jackson, any thoughts? Maybe we can start with you.
Well, I would just say I've been beaming all morning about this. I mean, I think that it is, it shows the promise and the possibility of what can be. And I think that the more diverse perspectives we have on bodies like the Supreme Court and other bodies, the more we are able to really understand the conditions that we say we seek to address and can consider different worldviews on the best path forward. So I hope that there is jubilation among the Afro-Latino community for this historic nomination that I think is also our win. I think that Marvin, you talked about showing up as an educator. We may need to do that to some extent, to just understand, to help others understand the impact potentially of the nomination. But I would hope that we can share in the joy that is appropriate for this occasion.
Marvin, anything to add, to share?
I
Anything?
I think it was summed up really well. I'll add a story to it. A couple of years ago, when Black Panther came out, one of my good friends, she has 2 boys, and they saw a commercial, and the kid, one of the kids, the younger one, I think he was about 5 or 6, said, "Mommy, that's me," when he looked at the Black Panther. And in that story, when she told it, she was like, "I can't imagine the potential that opened up for my boy." And so when I think about this nomination, is similar, right? I am also beaming and excited because I know what this means not only for Black women across the country, but across the world, but also what it means to us, right? So not only Black women, but also Black men, and how we value our Black women. And so I'm excited. I think it is incredibly courageous, right? Because you're already seeing the president receiving some arrows, but I think is the right thing to do, and he did it. So I'm so proud of that.
Thank you, Marvin. Sid, final word on this.
Yeah, I'll just say I'm so incredibly proud that President Biden nominated Ketanji Brown Jackson, who's clearly qualified to serve on the United States Supreme Court. But I'm going to take this as even another example of the fact that we have so many Black women, Afro-Latinas, that are so qualified to do amazing things. And yet, why did it take so long for corporate America to name Ursula Burns to be the first Black woman of any Fortune 500 company? Why is it that there are only 2 Black women that are serving as CEOs of any Fortune 500 company? Why are there only 2 Latinas? And why is it that corporate America has only produced 1 Afro-Latino CEO of any company when they named Julio Portalatin the CEO for Mercer, Dominicano and first Afro-Latino, highest ranking Afro-Latino ever. It means that we have so many that have succeeded in so many ways, but we know it's important to do this. And so I certainly am super excited for Judge Jackson, soon to be hopefully Justice Jackson, and so this is very important. But I think it just goes to the conversation, the fact that we must be more included, because we know that our Afro-Latinas, particularly who are Black, Latina, and women, need to be included, and there must be intentionality. So I'm very proud of this. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Sid. And I'll just add that from my perspective, from my perch, I've seen already statements that have come out in the press and on social media and so on from many of the Latino organizations in the community, not just headed by Afro-Latinos, but organizations of Latinos of all backgrounds, who have applauded this, as Marvin put it, courageous action of this decision. And what I'm seeing certainly is no division. I'm seeing support from the Latino community for the president's decision. And I think that's worth noting, right? That it's not something that's been in any way seen to be controversial, but in fact that folks think is nothing but positive for the nation, given her experience, her life experience, her insight, her perspective, her proximity to understanding the issues that folks who are impacted by the laws set by the highest court in the land on the one hand, and then again her impeccable credentials as a jurist on the other. And so I think that's worth noting, and I wanted to make sure to highlight that and to share that as we participate in this conversation, given that it's truly hot off the presses. As we get ready to start winding down to transition to our next program, I want to end with one last question for the panel here, and that is, given that, as we've discussed already quite a bit, there is a need for more knowledge about our community. There's a need for more knowledge about our community within the Latino community. There's a need for more knowledge about Afro-Latinos in the African American, in the Black community, and in the broader United States population, right? So if we can try to narrow this down, even though I'm sure there's many things we should share, what is one thing you think that Latinos, that the Black community, and that the rest of America, whites and Asian Americans and Native Americans, et cetera, need to know about Afro-Latinos? What is one thing you want to make sure is said and that gets heard and that perhaps gets further explored after today by the broader population? Let's go once again to you, Dr. Jackson, to wrap us up.
I think it needs to be known that our histories, our current circumstances, and our futures are intertwined, and recognizing the complexity that Afro-Latinidad, this identity, recognizing understanding of the complexity that identity demands is something that will only make us stronger as a country. So there is something about the ability to hold nuance, and to not just default to sound bites or the most simplistic explanations for who's in the house and what it means. I think that would be something that I would want to make known to all of those communities. And again, the power of the African diaspora, and particularly the cultural contributions of the African diaspora, and the ability, the power in that to unite and to propel us, I think is a resource that we haven't yet fully understood.
Thank you, Dr. Jackson. And let's continue in clockwise fashion. So let's go to you, Marvin. What is one thing that you would say? What's your final word that you'd share?
Dr. Jackson always makes me think a little bit more. It's that, we have to start asking each other where we're from with a little bit less fear and more curiosity. And I think that's what I want to communicate to both groups, right? That when I think about who I am, is a part of both communities, right? And so engage me from that vantage point, right? That I'm not a foreigner to either one of them, that I belong to both. And I think when you approach it in that way, I think it's a much more fruitful conversation. And so I'm looking forward to the day when that actually comes to fruition, so that we can walk together as one community.
Well said, Marvin. Thank you. And Sid, final word.
I'll just say, not that this is a shameless plug, but I'm proud that I come from a family that is also where my brother is the padrino of merengue hip hop, Magic Juan, who used to be Puerto Uno. And I'll just say, as he says in his famous song, Latinos, dime esos son Latino, Latino hasta la muerte. And of course, how he names all the countries where we all are from. But most importantly, that when they see my brother Magic Juan on stage, they see a Black man. and they see a Black man singing merengue hip hop, and so it shows the importance of this culture. But at the same time, we have to look at this also about the entire area within our communities. We have to have courageous conversations within the Black community, within the Latino community. We have to make sure that overall America knows who we are, and so that we can continue to have those courageous conversations about race and how this impacts Afro-Latinos. And we must do that so that together we can lock arms together, sing hymns together, say, si se puede, we shall overcome. And together, if we do that, as we say in our Dominican community, pa'lante mi gente. And I know that the best is yet to come, and a big thank you to the Biden administration, to the White House for this very important topic. Let's keep the conversation going.
Thank you so much for those comments. Thank you, Sid. Thank you, Marvin. Thank you, Dr. Jackson. I think that a lot of folks have learned quite a bit. Follow these folks on social media, learn more about them. Please engage with us. And I just want to thank all of you, and I want to thank also the White House for the opportunity to participate and for holding this event. As folks have said, I just want to add my 2 cents of appreciation as well. I think raising up this segment of our population, raising up this topic in our community, I think is invaluable, and it's something that, again, will have tremendous benefits for us as a society, for as a community, and as an amalgamation of cultures that is the United States. So with that, thank you very much. I'm going to turn it back over to Carissa, our dear friend, our leader, our moderator for this afternoon, and we appreciate it, and we'll look forward to continuing the program.
Thank you so much, Marco. That was such a jam-packed panel. It was really, really exciting just to hear everyone's different insight, just what all of you are working on as we keep equity at the center of everything that we're doing here, but also just making the connection of how diverse our communities are and how often that these stories are not told as people view the Latino community. I'm actually very excited to continue this program because we have a very special guest. She is a star in her own right. She is a writer, spoken word artist, and that is Melania Luisa Marte, who's going to share 2 pieces with us. I will say, Melania, I went online and I have seen your work before. You are amazing, thousands and thousands of views. Your voice has touched so many across the world. So I'm very excited to turn it over to you and let you bless us today with your beautiful words.
Thank you, Carissa. And this has been a very enlightening conversation. So thank you for having me. So briefly, I'm going to share 2 pieces. I'm going to share an excerpt from my poem, Afro-Latina, and I'll be sharing another poem called Black Spanish. So I'm just going to jump right on in. Afro-Latina. I am not Black and Latina. I am a Black Latina. I am anomaly strangers whisper about in disbelief, confident my tongue don't conjugate like theirs. I'm creating my own eulogy before they write me out the wrong story, contort my surviving into their savior, builds me a shrine to die on. And haven't we always been damaged goods? Sold at a bargain price, carbon copy us into ash, snap their fingers and blow us into dust. Her silhouette, the standard, her afro, a wig they take on and off, her melanin, packaged and sold at leisure, her culture, $1 billion commodity, merengue, bachata, salsa, rumba, tango, samba, name a beat, her hips haven't formed and twerked into baile. Into ritmo, into música. When Celia says La Negra tiene tumbao, she is speaking for millions of Afro-Latinas who go missing in history books, in movies, on television, in conversations about our own identities. In real life, Afro-Latinas, Black women, poor women, marginalized women are dying, are targets. And those who love her culture won't attend her funeral, will not speak of her life, instead tape up her house, ready to thrift and shop her culture away, buy up heirlooms and call them spicy, bloody red with passion. Do you see it? How easily Black girl becomes wallpaper to the building of her own identity, a mime always in front of her to edifice a movement. My culture is not your cash crop. My mother's country is not your paradise. My bilingual tongue is not your inquisition to crusade over. Dicen que soy Latina, until I start talking about colorism, until I affirm that I am fluently Black in both English and Spanish, until I check them on erasure, until I choose to speak on my own behalf, until I remind them my Afro comes before Latina. And my next piece is called Black Spanish. Es que hasta el español mío es negro y tiene un flow ratatá y no pide perdón, no se excusa ni se humilla. My Spanish walks into a room and you know it, leaves her S's at home. Vamos a lo que vinimos, she means it. Her inflection, a perrico ripiao. If you know, then you know. Nothing realer than some negras entrando al chat. Que se quiten o que recen, que ya vino a perrear. We be standing at the altar of our own rebirth. Let that beat drop, her knees know exactly what to do. Este ritmo fue hecho pa' ella. Aunque le nieguen entrada, la inspiración es ella. Las caderas, todo ella. Y dime qué negra tan bella. Este pelo, este fly, esta pelcha. Aunque copien, mientan, imiten. Esta chapa, este flow, esta mente. Igual santa y guerrera. When you hear us, you have no choice but to see us. We got accents by the pound. Que si capitaleño, si baeño, o me fui pa' Nueva York. In the Bronx hablan Spanglish y lo tiran bien tirado. Y aquí no hay de otra que plantearse bien planteado. Es que nuestro español no es malo. Nuestro español es negro. And you can't love our sauce and not credit the cooks. And my, how that wrist be working. This Spanish so Black. You built a whole month out of our culture just to sketch us out. This Black so Black, it translates itself. They got museums of our diamonds and gold. Set up shop at the beach just to stare at our sun. Accents thick as these thighs and as blessed as this earth. This for negras around the world. We will no longer wait to be adored. We built a Black universe and made ourselves the gods. Esto es pa' Gailén, pa' Sara, pa' Goyo, pa' Maluca, pa' Loraine y Amara, pa' Dash, pa' Jasmine, pa' Jennifer, pa' Cardi y la Bad Dominicana, pa' Marjo, pa' Janelle y pa' Yaisa, pa' La Gata y Alida, pa' las negras en los barrios y las mamis que nos crían. Thank you all.
Woo! We are giving you virtual claps. I know everybody is snapping and clapping where they are. Thank you so much, Melania, for coming through and just blessing us with that beautiful, beautiful, beautiful spoken word. We are going to continue our amazing, amazing program. And actually, next up, we are going to have the chance to hear from two administration officials who are working each and every day promoting wellness within their tracks of work. As we are centering wellness and equity here across the Biden-Harris administration. So I'm very excited first to introduce our Department of Energy Deputy Director for Energy Justice, Shalonda Baker. She is amazing, superstar. Anytime she does anything, I will tell y'all that there's a group chat that just lights up and likes everything that she does because we're all huge fans of her work. And continuing this amazing, amazing history-making administration, we actually have here today Acting National Director of the Minority Business Development Agency, Miguel Estienne. And so I'm very excited to actually turn it over to both of you and essentially just say, firstly, thank you for making the time. I know like all of us here, we're all dashing in between multiple things, but so thank you for just taking a moment to come take part into this amazing, amazing Afro-Latino Heritage Celebration to mark the end of the month. So I'll just quickly turn it over to you all to quickly introduce yourselves and say hello, and then we'll go into the questions.
Well, thank you so much, Carissa. It is really great to see your face, and we all love and support you and see all the amazing things you're doing in this administration. As you said, I'm Shalonda Baker, and I'm the Deputy Director for Energy Justice at the Department of Energy. It's a role that has never before existed, and it's one that I humbly occupy. The role is really dedicated to ensuring that we have an equitable transition away from fossil fuels to clean energy. So delighted to be here on this panel, and I'll hand over the mic to Miguel.
Thank you, Shalanda, and thank you, Carissa, for your kind words. And it is really an honor and a privilege and a source of pride to be part of this event today, representing not only the administration, but our culture, our heritage, our race, representing the people that we come from and have made us proud. My name is Miguel Estienne, and I lead the Minority Business Development Agency at the Department of Commerce. This is the only agency tasked the federal government with promoting the growth of minority-owned businesses in America. And so our mission is bold, and our expectations of success are directly aligned with the people that we're talking to and with today. So it's great to be here today.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Thank you so much, Miguel. And thank you so much, Shalonda, for introducing yourself as well. Well, continuing our theme, we have been focused on Black wellness, whether it's mental, physical, environmental, or financial. What do you see as the administration's biggest accomplishment in helping achieve Black wellness and Afro-Latino wellness? And I'll actually turn that first question over to you, Miguel.
Sure, absolutely. Well, I think, listen, the tone that President Biden set by setting the executive order 13985, racial equity, was huge, because it set a guiding principle, a tone for the entire government to make racial equity a priority. And this is a priority that we see in terms of the policies and programs that we set, the procurement targets, so the ability to channel and be sensitive of how we structure our agreements with companies that buy from the government or through the government. It sets a tone for our aspirations in terms of diversity and inclusion, the people that we work with. It set the tone about the priorities, the legislative priorities that we push through in Congress. And putting the whole of government behind social aspiration is huge. And so, I'm pretty sure we're going to discuss today some of the examples that have materialized as a result of this executive order. But in 10 years from now, we're going to look back and say, it all began here. It all began with the boldness of recognizing that we have to do better in order to overcome the biases, the structural biases that at times have prevented this institution from doing the right thing, even when we know that things have to change. And so by far, racial equity on executive order is probably the boldest and most significant aspect.
Yeah, I agree. It was definitely groundbreaking. I remember when he signed it and just the excitement and what it meant at a federal level and just the ways that we can really, really make change, across our administration. I'm going to turn that question over to you as well, Shalonda. And what are your thoughts on essentially what is this administration's biggest accomplishments as far as achieving Black wellness and Afro-Latino wellness, especially with you leading at the great intersection of energy justice. So really excited to hear your thoughts on this question as well.
Sure. So I just want to underscore Miguel's comment. I think Executive Order 13985 was really groundbreaking in so many ways. I get to serve as the Secretary's advisor on equity, so I have the privilege of leading a number of executive orders that have been the center point, the focal point of this administration. But let me level set for those of you who are not as familiar with the crisis that communities face when it comes to energy, when it comes to environmental harms and hazards, when it comes to climate. We know that we have a wellness crisis in Black and Brown communities. The disproportionate impact of the COVID-19 pandemic really has brought the inequities that those communities face into sharp relief. But that is intricately linked with the crisis that we face with respect to climate, environment, and energy. So on the environmental side, we know that Black and Latinx communities are disproportionately exposed to things like particulate matter, things like other exposures to environmental hazards. They also tend to house more of our infrastructure that is polluting in this country. On the energy side, we also know that Black households are experiencing energy insecurity at a rate of 52.2%. I say that because that to me is mind-blowing. Over half of Black households in this country has trouble meeting ordinary household energy costs. that is something that is imminently fixed and something that this administration is focused on. The third thing relates to climate, and that is we know that Black and Latinx communities are going to be the first and worst impacted by climate change. So that's the level setting in terms of environment, energy, and climate. But what this administration has done is to center Black and Brown communities and environmental justice communities in the transition away from fossil fuels to clean energy. Executive Order 14008 is the Tackling the Climate Crisis at Home and Abroad executive order. And Section 223 of that order establishes the historic and groundbreaking Justice 40 initiative, which is the president's promise that 40% of our historic, of the benefits of our historic spending in climate and clean energy has to go to disadvantaged communities. And so these are the communities that I just described. They're on the front lines of environmental harms and hazards. They're experiencing extraordinary energy burden and transportation burden, and they're on the front lines of climate change. This is groundbreaking. We are in the middle of a revolution. We're in the middle of something really historic in terms of how we view infrastructure and how we're going to make sure that those who have been harmed in the past are centered as we move forward. So I'm thrilled to be a part of this administration. I think, as Miguel said, when we look back on this moment, we realize that we were really a part of something transformative. So I'm really honored to serve alongside Miguel and you, Carissa, and others in this administration.
Wow, thank you, Shalonda. And thanks for giving that rundown, both of you, of just, all the ways that our administration is really, really prioritizing equity at the center of all we do. I really think you all, both of you hit it right on the nose as far as sharing, the unique ways that we're making sure that equity is integrated throughout. It's not just like a tagline, it's not just like a statement, but in every single way, how are we centering equity across the federal level, and what does implementation really look like from our offices and from our roles? So continuing on this point of equity, we know that equity also means progress. So what do you see, or what work you think lies ahead in achieving full wellness when it comes to the equity work that each of you are all doing?
You like me to go first, Carissa?
Yep, you could go first, Miguel.
Yeah, sure. Well, listen, we are all, policymakers and, working through programs, but maybe we should relate to, what is our day-to-day, right, out there in America. And, after the passage of the infrastructure bill, for example, that bill, is all about making America stronger, rebuilding our infrastructure, and making our day-to-day, better. And by the way, that bill was heavily informed by our racial equity, priorities and guiding principles. And what does that mean? Let's take broadband, for example. How many rural communities in America lack basic access to high-speed internet? And my kids here in Washington, D.C., they could get access to tutorials in high speed and continue to enhance their academic performance. And why is it that, a kid that might be, 120 miles, west of where I live, do not have the same capabilities? That is wrong. And it just so happens that, Black families are 9% less likely to have broadband access, and Latin America families or Hispanic families are 15% less likely. And that's why broadband is not only about building or rebuilding, but, making our lives better. And so these two goals can be achieved. It is a solid investment for the country, and it's a solid investment for our communities. Take, for instance, public transportation. My grandma, abuela, used to take public bus, and 31% of our, Black families, 19% of Hispanics, continue to depend heavily on public transportation. And is your ability to get to home, to drop your kids at school, to get an extra hour of sleep, so that you can balance work life, is to get access to that second job, while maintaining your dignity. And so, these programs are real, and the way we think about it. I represent, an agency, as I mentioned before, that promotes the growth of minority-owned businesses. Let me put this in perspective. After the infrastructure bill, this agency was finally codified into law. For the past 50 years, the agency was a product of an executive order. That meant that any president could have eliminated the only agency tasked with promoting the well-being of minority-owned businesses. Now it's a product of law thanks to the infrastructure bill that was passed and pushed through by this administration. And so when you think about wellness, financial wellness, for instance, let me give you a fact. If we were to close the poverty gap that exists between businesses that are minority-owned versus those that are not, you will add $5 trillion to the US economy. That is huge. And it's huge because we know that Latino businesses are more likely to recruit Latino professionals. We know that Black American businesses are more likely to recruit Black American professionals and therefore reinvest in their own communities. This is about economic justice and social justice. So yeah, we have a lot to go. We are also in the right trajectory.
Thank you so much, Miguel.
Yes, I'll jump in here in response to the question. And Miguel, I am so thrilled about your new role and sort of the codification of the importance of supporting economic development in Black and Brown communities. I'll say for the audience here that I serve in an office called the Office of Economic Impact and Diversity, and I'm the president's nominee to lead that office. And we are just thrilled to be able to partner with MBDA because similarly, the mission of the Office of Economic Impact and Diversity is to support minority businesses, BIPOC communities, underrepresented folks throughout the Department of Energy, as well as ensure that the policies that we're developing in the department do not have disproportionate impacts on those communities. So I'm excited to be kind of hand in hand as we move into this energy transition, but also work to build wealth in our communities across the country. One thing I'll say that we are really focused on at the Department of Energy is maximizing our understanding of place, maximizing our understanding of communities. And so the Secretary is very much focused on place-based work, understanding the unique challenges that communities face, as well as the unique capacities that those communities have to bring to the table, right? And historically, communities have not always had an open door with respect to the government. So we're working hard to understand communities, understand places, and also really engaging in stakeholder engagement across the board, particularly as it applies to the bipartisan infrastructure law. So that's very much something we're excited about, and I look forward to doing that work as we implement the bill.
Thank you, Shalonda and Miguel. And Shalonda, I love what you said there in your response about kind of just maximizing the community, kind of that collaborative approach of, just working across different verticals, working across different communities, working across even, different agencies. We do a lot of interagency calls here, as we all know, pretty much centering how we can all work together and essentially make progress in policy. So I actually want to come up on our last question here for this panel. And pretty much I want to just, hear from both of you all, and it could be an example in the current work that you do or a model that you've seen in previous, positions that you held. But essentially, what is an example of collaboration between, multicultural communities, specifically maybe between the Black and Latino community, that you can point to that serves as a good example to follow as we're looking for progress? And we know coalition building is so important. And we can actually start off with you, Shalonda, since Miguel has gone first.
Yes, he's been breaking the ice every time. So let me talk about climate. The moment that we are in is extraordinary, and we do face a crisis that will have disproportionate impacts on certain communities. The Justice 40 initiative was not written out of whole cloth. It was written due to the work of a coalition that was, traditionally predominantly white, green organizations, so organizations that serve in the environmental space, as well as those who are participants in environmental justice movements and causes, they came together. I think, prior to the president's election, as well as during the campaign, to really think through how we could maximize our impacts in frontline communities on the front lines of climate change. This work was in every way multicultural, right? And required folks to talk across differences, because we know that in order to effectively tackle the climate crisis, we have to have everyone at the table. And we really can't make progress unless those who are the most vulnerable are centered. And so, and their needs are really met. And so I think that, to me, is a really incredible example of how in this administration and leading up to this administration, we saw that kind of cross-cultural connection. And so, again, I'm standing on those shoulders, even in my role, and very much look forward to continued collaboration across those different stakeholder groups in this work.
Thank you, Shalonda. And what you said is true about the climate movement. We're going to need all parties. I mean, it is something that when people think climate, they don't think necessarily communities of color, Black and Brown communities. And so just really, really thrilled to see all the amazing work that you highlighted that your office is doing, the administrator is doing. Over to you, Miguel, about that question. How does collaboration, play out in your role? What does that look like? And what is a good model that you've seen that we, should all probably strive to do or follow in our work?
Yeah, well, let me just acknowledge, Shalanda, that is such a great example. And I believe that in recognizing our collective challenge and opportunity in connection to climate, we should see our own humanity. And we talk too much about how different we are, but the fact of the matter is that, our collective needs come down to some basic human, needs. And in front of climate, we have to come together. And I think this brings me to Carissa, to your question, which, listen, I'm a business guy and a public servant. And, the one area that I have, that I continue to see in the entrepreneurial sphere, huge opportunity and collaboration is in, recognizing needs that have been neglected in our communities by a system that perhaps in some cases was not necessarily built by us or for our communities, right? And so, I see it all the time with entrepreneurs of color that, regardless of your ethnicity or race, come together. And they have the sympathy of recognizing that, hey, you speak a different language, I get it, Spanish, Mandarin, but the fact is that no one thought about that need. You might, come from the Caribbean and you have a different, appreciation for food or music, and no one thought about that need. And because of that, there is a huge amount of, commercial opportunity, innovation, ability to work and collaborate in different matters, empathy around, our individual needs that, drives, innovation, opportunity, wealth creation, jobs, opportunities for investment, and ultimately to make our communities stronger and better. And I see it all every single day. Our agency supports entrepreneurs that happen to be, entrepreneurs of color, for example. And as a result, we recognize the business needs and the needs of these, our communities in the work we do. So, at the end of the day, what I'll say is that our uniqueness as individuals is what makes, and recognizing and embracing our uniqueness as individuals is what makes our country strong. And so, that is the one area of collaboration that I see is great, and I hope it continues.
Thank you, Miguel. That was awesome. And I think you said it just right. It is recognizing the uniqueness of our communities and making sure that those uniquenesses are recognized, that they are seen, that they are talked about, that they are amplified as we're thinking about policy making, as we're thinking about federal change, as we're thinking about initiatives, as we're thinking about programming and staffing, even just the unique differences between us three on this call, right? But it's so good that each of us are in these different roles and serving in different positions because we each have our own lens on how we see the world. And that lens is important as we are there in our roles each and every day, making change and, essentially advising on, progress at the federal level. So I just want to say thank you, thank you, thank you to both of you. I want to say thank you, Shalonda. I want to say thank you, Miguel. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us here at the White House for this special Afro-Latino Heritage Celebration in honor of Black History Month. We do truly appreciate the time. I know that you all, like many of us, are probably running from Zoom to Zoom. So just really thank you from the bottom of our heart here from the Office of Public Engagement for taking the time to join us today.
Thank you so much, Carissa.
Thank you, Carissa.
Well, before we close our program, I just want to, essentially say thank you to everyone so far who has spoken, everyone who has come before us and just shared their insight. We have one more speaker today, and this is actually our fearless leader here in the Office of Public Engagement. It is Congressman Cedric Richmond, who from day one, has been here leading our office, making sure that we're connecting with communities, all communities. I think that the cross collaboration that we just talked about and highlighted is something that brought together this call. I want to give a special shout out to my colleague, Ernesto, who leads our Latino engagement work here in the Office of Public Engagement. And so without further ado, I'm gonna give it over to Congressman Cedric Richmond for our final closing word. But thank you everyone for making time to join us today for our virtual Afro-Latino Heritage Celebration.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's good to be with you. I want to thank all of our program participants for taking time to celebrate Afro-Latino heritage with us. I also want to thank all of you who tuned in today. From day one, this administration has been focused on the communities we serve. That means building a cabinet and an administration that looks like America. That means developing policies that center on equity and recognize the effects of institutionalized racism. Creating the space to have conversations like the one we had today is another testament to that commitment. This year's White House Black History Month, Black Wellness, Working to Make Black Lives Better, has allowed us to highlight the experiences of so many across the country. Over the last few weeks, we focused on all that Black wellness means, from physical and mental health, wellness, to financial, environmental, and even spiritual wellness. We've been able to celebrate the accomplishments of this first year in office and how far we've come, while also taking stock of the work that remains before us. We know there's more to do. So thank you for being with us today. We look forward to our continued partnership and the work that we'll do together. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman, for those closing words. Well, thank you so much. You heard him for joining us here today. We are really appreciative out of the Office of Public Engagement here at the White House. You can follow us on Twitter. You can follow us on Instagram to stay up to date with all the programming and initiatives we have going on. But truly, thank you for tuning in. Thank you to all of our esteemed guests and speakers. We really couldn't have done this without all of you. So have a blessed Friday and happy Black History Month. Goodbye.